In the Earth's most ancient and profound memories, the existence of some lives is, in itself, a long, contradictory poem about extreme magnitude and ultimate tenderness. He possessed a colossal body that was shocking even in the history of terrestrial animals. His 8-meter-long, 5-meter-tall frame should have been the most trembling predatory giant at the bottom of the dense forest. Yet, unlike his brutal kin who relied on hard scales, fangs, and claws to slaughter wantonly across the plains, his skin was covered in gorgeous yet understated soft feathers. When unfurled, they resembled a warm, gray mist that would never dissipate from the depths of time. This strange, even somewhat sacred-looking ancient giant bird did not choose to fall in a tragic defense of territory, nor did it leave behind any violent wails in its final hours. Tonight, let us accompany the flickering hearth fire and this story, which you need not strain to remember, as we step into the true life he led. Gigantoraptor Chiju, a name in the cold fossil archives that usually represents a giant oviraptorosaur living in the Uralian Basin during the late Cretaceous, with a size exceeding that of several adult elephants combined. But in the real night of 70 million years ago, a time filled with violent crustal changes and the panic before the mass extinction, Chiju lived as an introverted enigma through his extreme, restrained self-stasis. This is not a cold encyclopedia about territorial rule and bloody plunder, but a midnight song about how to lay down the burden of frantic running in the torrent of extreme temperature differences, and use feathers several meters long to enclose an absolutely warm dream for the world. 70 million years ago, on the edge of the Gobi Plains, the flow of time seemed stretched, and the air was forever filled with the slightly bitter scent of volcanic ash from excessive humidity. It was a sunset era of armored dinosaurs and tyrannosaurs rampaging across the wilderness. Every step of their massive bodies caused the ferns on the forest floor to emit sounds of desperate fracturing. Chiju stood at the edge of this dense forest filled with the pressure of life. His feather-covered body appeared exceptionally steady in the shadows of ancient redwoods, like a gray statue moving slowly through time. The catalyst for the first turning point in his fate was a rare polar cold front that lasted for months. The entire Uralian Basin was shrouded in damp cold fog within just a few hours. The sharp drop in temperature caused the lush shrubs they relied on to freeze overnight, and the order of the entire plain collapsed in panic and hunger. Chiju's companions were terrified by the sudden frost. Relying on their strong limbs, they began endless, blind, and frantic running on the dark forest floor. They huddled and shoved, frantically pecking each other with hard keratin beaks for shallow caves to block the cold wind. Dull thuds and panicked wails echoed long into the night. Chiju watched it all quietly. He saw companions who once walked side by side torn apart, their beautiful feathers shattering into useless scraps under heavy blows, blood staining the muddy flats. As a gigantoraptor with an extremely gentle and introverted personality, he was naturally out of place in this group attrition. The elder leader began to fix his suspicious gaze upon him. At that moment, seeing his companions become extremely ugly under the drive of panic and greed, the tension and fear within Chiju finally tore open a profound gap. He realized that the panic and violence shown by these giants, who claimed to control the plains, when facing the exhaustion of the era, was far more suffocating than the drought itself. He did not rise to meet the violent roars, nor did he attempt to join the chaotic power struggle. Instead, on an evening when the heat wave slowly faded, he turned his body with extreme slowness. Stepping across the cracked red earth, his movements were as slow as a gray feather silently falling through time. Without a trace of reluctance, he left the territory filled with madness, walking step by step toward the desolate, silent depths of the unknown wilderness. Leaving the protection of the group meant Chiju had to face, alone, the top nocturnal predators hidden in the shadows of the night, those that followed the law of rapid killing, such as the primitive tyrannosaurids adept at ambushing in the deep forest. On this open wilderness without forest cover, any sudden turn caused by panic would cause Chiju's multi-ton skeleton to collapse under the pressure of its own weight. This was a restraint trained by absolute magnitude, yet Chiju stubbornly carried his slow rhythm into his very marrow, living as a profound enigma that left predators at a loss. He walked very slowly. Because the long, gorgeous wings required significant energy, every step required his slender hind limbs to pause in the air for seconds. His broad feet landed on the dry gravel, making a soft, rustling sound. That posture did not resemble an escape, but rather a way of using his body to touch and sense the heartbeat of the land. This slowness created a wondrous resonance with his surroundings. Throughout the long months of travel, his thick belly, due to resting on the damp ground for long periods, began to feel a thick, inescapable chill, making his massive frame feel extremely clumsy and aching at night. He understood that if he couldn't find a safe, warm refuge before freezing completely, the thick, inescapable, dull pain would destroy his will. Finally, at the moment when night had fully fallen and the wind on the plains faded, he discovered in the depths of the forest, beneath a hidden cliff naturally surrounded by hundreds of giant trees, a secret hollow wrapped in countless rocks. This was a natural haven inadvertently sealed by nature. The towering cliff walls blocked out the violent monsoon winds, and the temperature remained as comfortable and stable as a mammal's den. Chiju slowly stopped at the edge of the hollow. He tested the texture and temperature of the soil with his long forelimbs, and then, beneath the moonlight, began the most important sleep ritual of his life. In those shallow stories of later ages that obsess over portraying dinosaur wars, the giant Gigantoraptor is habitually marginalized, as if lacking giant horns or a tail club condemns one to be a victim in the meat grinder of fate. But this arrogant interpretation fails to grasp the profound wisdom in Chiju's bones, a wisdom based on absolute defense and extreme restraint. His magnitude was not for showing off power, but served as an invisible psychological wall allowing him to skillfully avoid the storms of the era. On the first night after settling in this secret hollow, danger inevitably penetrated the forest defense, arriving at the edge of this quiet haven in the coldest of manners. A primitive tyrannosaur, several times Chiju's size, its spirit exhausted from long hunting failures, tracked the faint scent of life and crept silently toward the edge of the campsite. The entire canyon was paralyzed in a deathly, terrifying silence. From the predator's maw, lined with coarse barbs, thick, corrosive, and malodorous saliva dripped onto the rocks with a faint scraping sound. The ancient cicadas fell silent in an instant, the bushes frozen in deathly stillness, the water vapor seemed to solidify into ice under the predator's greedy gaze. Yet, facing this terrifying encirclement, enough to frighten any smaller species to death, Chiju displayed a near-sacred, chilling composure. He emitted no futile roar to vent fear, nor did he panic and scatter like his kin. Instead, he lowered his center of gravity, planting his massive body firmly into the soft earth. He ceased all struggling, burying his head deep between his thick forelimbs, turning the pair of long wings on his back, meters long and covered in hard feathers, directly toward the hunter in the darkness. In the moments when lightning occasionally tore through the night sky, the towering wings refracted a cold and heavy sheen like iron ore. He was not food to be torn, but an impassable, absolute wall rising from the earth. This siege of will lasted for a full hour. In the end, before the mountain-like, immovable pressure and restraint of Chiju, the madness in the predator's eyes was replaced by frustration, and it could only retreat back into the dark forest. After the heart-stopping standoff subsided, the midnight in the rainforest welcomed its most gentle and fatalistic moment as the clouds finally parted, revealing a massive fissure. A faint, emerald-hued glimmer of moonlight spilled silently from the canopy, illuminating the small green sanctuary where Chiju lay, painting every shadow with a sacred silver edge. And what made this wilderness truly quiet was the wind of the extremely gentle and fine polar cold air blowing from the plains far away. Chiju completely let go of all the tension in his body. In this refuge that belonged to him alone, he began a deeply healing and immersive pre-sleep relaxation ritual. This is a unique life ritual of the Gigantoraptor. He began, from the tip of his tail, to stretch his massive muscle groups that had been tense all day, section by section, with extreme slowness. He slowly adjusted his posture, pressing his thick, exhausted, and stiff belly, worn by his long wandering and the recent standoff, inch by inch toward the ground. He bent his legs, thick as stone pillars, allowing his heavy chest to make the first contact with the soft red soil that had absorbed enough heat during the day and still radiated warmth. At that instant, the warmth stored in the soil all day began to seep slowly, like warm spring water, through the texture of his abdomen. The heat penetrated his thick subcutaneous fat, wrapped his tense muscle fibers, and spread to every bone joint aching from the long trip, dissolving all heavy anxiety within. Then, with elegant slow-motion grace, he coiled his mountain-like body into a steady circle, using his wings, unfurled for meters, to wrap himself completely like a giant down blanket. This warmth, fused with the Earth's gravity, held an irresistible hypnotic power. It was so stable that Chiju no longer felt like a wandering refugee, but a raw stone essential to this land. The night muted the ancient storms, the sound of the wind became a soothing white noise. With this safety net provided by the earth, his eyelids became heavy, and his consciousness dissipated into a gentle, void-like dream. The end of life arrived calmly and elegantly. For Chiju, it was merely the most peaceful night out of countless comfortable ones. It was a typical late Cretaceous dry season, filled with the scent of withered plants and a night sky lit by thousands of gentle meteors. Chiju was too old, his internal blood pump could no longer carry warm blood to his 8-meter-long frame, and every breath required enduring the grinding sound of calcification deep in his chest. Yet he showed no panic. On that starlit night, he returned to the warm red earth plane that had accompanied him for most of his life and slowly lay down in his habitual posture. He rested his weary head gently in a stone hollow. The soil was rough and warm, bringing the ultimate liberation to his life force. As the warm gravity of the earth took over, a collapse of the sandstone cliff poured soft red sand into the hollow. There was no fear and no lament. This supreme wanderer of relaxation in the plains, within his beloved moonlight sanctuary and the comforting white noise of the wind, passed directly into eternal sleep. Over the next 100 million years, the world changed. This ancient continent underwent splits and drifts, as former bustling shoals were compressed into cold rock. Chiju's frame, maintaining its perfect lying posture, was tightly encased in sand, undergoing dissociation and mineralization. Every small vertebra and giant skull trace fused with the cold rock, becoming an exquisite part of the Earth's skeleton. 100 million years acted like a traceless flood, mercilessly washing away all pride and arrogance, but leaving behind only Chiju's restraint and peace, forever solidified between the ribs of the Earth. Now, this massive fossil specimen, hailed as the world's most elegant raptor, lies quietly in the center display case of a modern museum, maintaining constant temperature and humidity. Under soft mercury lights, it continues to emanate an ancient, serene aura to everyone who stops to gaze. The river that once accompanied him for countless years has long dried up, and those tall bald cypresses have turned into underground coal, yet, the breathing rhythm Chiju left behind on that night seems to still faintly echo under the vast night sky of modern cities. In this modern world filled with survival anxiety, where everyone is forced to run and is pressured until they can barely breathe, this story of an ancient hermit bowing his head in the twilight and sleeping in slow motion on warm sands is your most solid spiritual refuge tonight. There is no need to think about the rushing and toil of tomorrow, nor is there any need to pay heed to the secular strife that makes you feel weary and tense. The earth will, just as it accepted Chiju, gently support your exhausted body with the softest gravity and the boundless night, taking away all your unease. At this very moment, your pillow is radiating the most perfect temperature, and the soft quilt provides the most reassuring physical embrace, just like the soft red sand and calm pool that once gently wrapped Chiju millions of years ago. Outside the window, perhaps the night wind of a modern city is blowing, and the curtains are gently rippling in the dark. These are the gentle echoes left behind in the depths of space and time by the breeze from that coastal cape of 100 million years ago. Put down all the defenses and heavy burdens in your heart. Listen to this story, which you need not strain to remember, and let those slow, measured, and lingering inhalations lead you, slowly, to close your eyes. Good night, Gigantoraptor Chiju. Good night, to every soul who has laid down its armor and returned to inner peace.